My name is Alara. I'm 29 years old, and for the last 3 years, I've been the designated failure of my family. Last Thanksgiving, surrounded by the scent of turkey and shattered dreams, my own father looked me in the eye and called me useless in front of a guest we were all desperate to impress. My brother smirked, and my mother just nodded in agreement. What they didn't know was that the distinguished CEO sitting at our table, the man my brother was practically drooling to get an investment from, was holding a multi-million-dollar secret. And in a few moments, he was going to announce me not as the family failure, but as his new business partner. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. And before I tell you how that disastrous dinner became the single greatest night of my life, hit like and subscribe to hear more stories about how true worth is often invisible to those closest to us. Before that fateful Thanksgiving, my life was a quiet symphony of disappointment, at least according to my family. On paper, I was the picture of mediocrity, an entry-level IT support technician at a regional paper company. My days consisted of resetting passwords, troubleshooting printer jams, and explaining to middle-aged managers that, no, hitting the monitor harder would not make the computer run faster. It was a soul-crushing, fluorescent-lit existence that paid just enough to cover my share of the bills in the house I still shared with my parents, and more importantly, my younger brother, Leo. You see, in the constellation of our family, Leo was the Sunday, and I was a distant, barely twinkling star they had long since stopped looking for. At 27, Leo was a visionary, an entrepreneur, a disruptor. These were the words my parents used to describe him. The words I would use were unemployed and delusional. Leo bounced from one half-baked startup idea to the next, each one funded by a steady stream of my parents' retirement savings and, indirectly, my own salary. There was Uber for dog walkers, which failed because he forgot to factor in insurance. Then came Artisanal Air, a subscription service for bottled air from different exotic locations, which surprisingly didn't find a market. His latest venture was a blockchain-based social media platform for pet influencers. He'd spent 6 months and nearly $50,000 on it, with nothing to show but a non-functional website and a mountain of debt. Yet, to my parents, Mark and Susan, Leo's failures were just stepping stones to greatness. "He's not afraid to take risks, Alara," my father would say, his tone laced with a familiar note of disappointment directed at me. That's how titans of industry are made. You have to fail big to win big. My own failure, in their eyes, was far more unforgivable. 3 years ago, I had poured my heart, soul, and every penny I had into my own startup, a sophisticated AI-driven software that helped nonprofits optimize their fundraising efforts. I had a small team, a working prototype, and a deep-seated passion for the project. But a key investor pulled out at the last minute, and the whole thing collapsed. I lost everything. Instead of sympathy, I received lectures. "We told you it was too risky," my mother said, shaking her head. "You should have just gotten a stable job like we always wanted." The irony was suffocating. My risky venture was a well-researched, viable product. Leo's were literal jokes, but my failure was a stain on the family's reputation, while his were romanticized chapters in his epic hero's journey. So I did what they wanted. I got the stable job. I moved back home to save money, which really meant my paycheck was absorbed into the family's general fund, a fund that primarily serviced Leo's extravagant business expenses. The dynamic was set in stone. I was the reliable, boring, and ultimately disappointing daughter. Leo was the brilliant, charming, and endlessly promising son. This pattern of injustice had deep roots. I remember in college, Leo had a final project for his business class that was worth half his grade. He'd procrastinated until the night before it was due and had absolutely nothing. He came to me in a panic, begging for help. His idea was a mess, and the simple presentation he'd designed was full of errors. I stayed up with him until 4 a.m., not just fixing his mistakes, but fundamentally rewriting his business plan, redesigning his slides, and coding a small, functional demo to make his concept seem plausible. I was exhausted the next day for my own engineering final, but I felt a small glow of satisfaction for having saved him. He got an A+. When my parents heard, they took him out for a steak dinner to celebrate his genius. My father clapped him on the back and said, "That's my boy. A natural." Leo never once mentioned my contribution. When I quietly brought it up to my mother later, she just waved it away. "Oh, Elara, you're good with those technical things. It's what family does. You should be happy to help your brother succeed." My success was a tool for his. His was a celebration for the family. The drone incident a year ago was just a replay of the same theme. My 10-year-old car had finally died. I had been painstakingly saving for a down payment. The same week, Leo decided he needed a top-of-the-line drone for aerial marketing shots. My parents sat me down for that now infamous family meeting. "Elara, honey," my mother began, her voice soft and placating. "We know you need a car, but Leo's business is at a critical stage. Your savings would be an investment in the whole family's future." I remember staring at the worn-out spot on the carpet, feeling that familiar sense of helpless resignation. I gave them the money. Leo got his drone, flew it once into a tree, and it was never spoken of again. I took the bus to work for the next 6 months, through rain and snow. But I had a secret, a hidden world where I wasn't Elara, the IT support failure. Late at night, after my parents and Leo were asleep, I would open my personal laptop and become Phoenix. Phoenix was my freelance identity, an anonymous coder for hire on an exclusive platform for high-level tech projects. Phoenix was brilliant. Phoenix was sought after. Over the past 2 years, Phoenix had built a reputation for being one of the best in the business. My clients were international corporations and wealthy tech moguls who paid handsomely for my skills and discretion. They only knew that Phoenix delivered results. This secret life was my lifeline. The money I earned as Phoenix was tucked away in a separate bank account my family knew nothing about. It was my escape fund, my proof that their assessment of me was wrong. My biggest client was a man I knew only as Mr. S, a tech CEO who was notoriously private. He would send me the most challenging, fascinating projects, building security protocols, designing algorithms, even ghost coding entire applications. He treated me like a peer, a partner. His payments alone were more than triple my annual salary at the paper company. As Thanksgiving approached, I was just counting down the days until I could finally move out. I knew the holiday would be another painful performance of the family's favorite play, but I had no idea the lead role of the sacrificial lamb was about to be so publicly mine. The catalyst arrived in an email, not addressed to me, but to Leo. It was from the personal assistant of a man named Alistair Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. My parents, who monitored Leo's inbox like air traffic controllers, were ecstatic. "Leo, Alistair Sterling wants to have a call with you," my mother shrieked, waving the phone in the air as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Leo, who was on the couch researching premium dog hoodies, puffed out his chest. "Of course he does. My blockchain platform is revolutionary." It was only a matter of time before the big players took notice. The reality was less glamorous. Leo had been cold emailing every CEO and venture capitalist he could find, a digital carpet bombing of spam. By sheer chance, one had apparently slipped through a filter. The phone call was scheduled. My father insisted on being in the room to provide strategic guidance. I was in the kitchen, making dinner, and could overhear the entire conversation. It was a train wreck. Leo stumbled through his pitch, using buzzwords he didn't understand. It's a paradigm-shifting synergy of decentralized ledgers and pet-centric content aggregation, he said, his voice cracking. There were long, painful silences from the other end of the line. Finally, a calm, deep voice that sounded vaguely familiar cut him off. It's an interesting concept, Leo. I'm actually going to be in town for business the week of Thanksgiving. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in person. My parents nearly fainted from joy. An in-person meeting! This was it! This was the big break! We should invite him for Thanksgiving dinner, my mother declared. It will be more personal, more intimate. We can show him what a strong, supportive family we are. My father readily agreed. An invitation was sent, and to everyone's astonishment, it was accepted. Mr. Sterling's assistant confirmed he would be delighted to join us. The house was thrown into a state of frenzied preparation. This wasn't just a holiday dinner anymore. It was the most important business meeting of Leo's life. My mother planned a menu worthy of a Michelin star restaurant, pulling out recipes she hadn't used since her wedding. My father ordered several cases of a specific expensive wine he'd read about in a magazine, convinced it would signal sophistication. Leo bought a new Italian suit that cost more than my monthly paycheck, strutting around the house in it for days beforehand. And me? I was assigned my usual role, the background help, the stagehand for the main event. Alara, you'll need to help your mother with all the cooking, my father instructed. And make sure the house is spotless. We want to make the best possible impression. No pressure. But Leo's entire future could depend on this. Also, my mother added, not even looking up from polishing the good silver, let's try not to talk too much about your job. We can just say you're in computers. It sounds better than IT support. The implication was clear. My reality was an embarrassment that needed to be hidden. I was a set piece, a prop in the grand production of Leo's success. I spent the days leading up to Thanksgiving peeling potatoes, scrubbing floors, and listening to my family endlessly strategize. They rehearsed talking points for Leo. They debated which family photos to display, removing a recent one of me from my graduation because my robes looked drab. It was a full-scale campaign to sell Leo as a worthy investment. A strange feeling of dread began to curl in my stomach. The CEO's name, Alistair Sterling, kept nagging at me. Sterling Innovations. Mr. S. Could it be? I quickly dismissed the thought. It was impossible. A coincidence. The world was large. The tech industry was vast. There was no way my anonymous, high-paying client was the same man coming to my house to be courted by my brother. Still, a sliver of unease remained, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite silence. On Thanksgiving morning, the house was buzzing with a nervous energy. I was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on the pumpkin pies, when my father walked in. He looked at my simple sweater and jeans with disdain. "Is that what you're wearing?" he asked. "Elara, this is an important guest. Can't you at least try to look presentable?" I bit my tongue, the familiar sting of his disapproval washing over me. "I'll change before he gets here," I mumbled. "Good," he said, his eyes already scanning the room for imperfections. Everything has to be perfect for Leo today. As I went to my room, I realized the exhaustion I felt wasn't just physical. It was the deep, bone-weary fatigue that comes from constantly being told you're not enough. I had no idea that in just a few hours, the world would finally learn I was more than they could ever imagine. Alistair Sterling arrived at precisely 4 p.m. He was taller than I expected, with salt and pepper hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and an impeccably tailored suit that made my father and Leo's new outfits look cheap by comparison. There was a quiet authority about him, a stillness that commanded attention without demanding it. As my father swung the door open, a wave of performative charm washed over my family. "Alistair, welcome, welcome. We're so honored to have you," my father boomed, shaking his hand a little too enthusiastically. "Please, call me Mark. This is my wife, Susan, and our son, the visionary, Leo." Leo stepped forward, extending a sweaty palm. "Mr. Sterling, a true pleasure. I'm a great admirer of your work at Sterling Innovations." Mr. Sterling's smile was polite, but reserved. His eyes scanned the room and then they landed on me as I emerged from the kitchen, holding a tray of appetizers. For a fraction of a second, his calm composure flickered. I saw a flash of recognition, of surprise, before it was expertly masked. My blood ran cold. It was him. It was Mr. S., the man who knew me as Phoenix, the architect of his most complex projects, was standing in my living room, about to be served pigs in a blanket. "And this is our daughter, Ilara," my mother said, her tone a clear dismissal, as if introducing the hired help. "Ilara, don't just stand there, offer Mr. Sterling a drink." I moved forward on autopilot, my mind racing, 1,000 possibilities colliding at once. Did he recognize me? What did this mean? My secret world and my real world had just collided with the force of a supernova. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ilara," he said, his voice the same calm, deep tone from the phone call. But his eyes held a new, unreadable light as he took a glass of water from my tray. He knew. I was absolutely sure of it. The slight emphasis he put on my name was a signal, a secret acknowledgement just for me. We settled in the living room, and the Leo show began. My brother launched into his rehearsed pitch, my father interjecting with fawning praise. "Leo has always been a natural leader," he declared. "Even as a boy, he was always thinking outside the box." "Mr. Sterling listened patiently, nodding occasionally, his gaze periodically drifting towards me as I quietly refilled drinks and passed out napkins. Each time his eyes met mine, I felt a jolt, a silent acknowledgement that we were the only two people in the room who knew the truth. The first major slight came when Mr. Sterling, in a polite attempt to include me, asked, "And Ilara, your mother mentioned you're in computers. What is it you do exactly?" Before I could answer, my mother laughed a light, tinkling laugh that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Ilara is our little helper bee. She does its support for a paper company. Very stable. She keeps the printers running," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. The message was clear. My job was menial, unimportant, a silly little thing compared to Leo's world-changing ambitions. I saw a muscle twitch in Mr. Sterling's jaw. "IT support can be incredibly complex," he said smoothly. "The backbone of any successful company is a flawless operational infrastructure. That's no small feat." My mother just blinked, the nuance of his comment flying completely over her head. "Well, yes, I suppose," she conceded, before immediately turning the conversation back to her golden child. "But Leo, he's a builder. He's creating the future." The dinner was a masterclass in my family's dysfunction. Every topic circled back to Leo. When the conversation turned to technology, Leo tried to engage Mr. Sterling, dropping buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and scalable monetization. My platform leverages AI-driven analytics to optimize pet engagement metrics, he said confidently. Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Which machine learning models are you using? TensorFlow? PyTorch? Leo's face went blank. The standard ones. The best ones, he stammered. The conversation was swiftly changed by my father. When travel came up, my parents recounted Leo's research trip to Bali, which I knew was a 2-week vacation I had helped pay for. When sports came up, my father told a story about Leo's championship-winning goal in high school soccer, conveniently forgetting that I had been the one who scored it. I sat in silence, picking at my food, feeling myself become more and more invisible, a ghost at my own family's table. The most painful part was watching them lie so effortlessly. They weren't just exaggerating, they were constructing an entirely false reality. They presented Leo's string of expensive failures as a series of bold experiments. The artisanal air venture was ahead of its time, my father explained sagely to Mr. Sterling. He was exploring the monetization of experiential commodities. The market just wasn't ready. Mr. Sterling simply nodded, taking a sip of wine, his expression unreadable. I wondered what he must be thinking. He was one of the sharpest minds in the tech world. He had to see through this pathetic charade. He had to know that my brother was a fraud. I began to feel a slow burn of anger. It wasn't just about me anymore. They were insulting Mr. Sterling's intelligence, assuming he was just another gullible investor they could charm. They were disrespecting the man who, unknowingly, had given me my self-respect back. He was my client, the one person who valued my skills, and my family was treating him like a fool. As I was clearing the main course plates, I overheard a snippet of conversation between my mother and Mr. Sterling. She was showing him a picture of Leo on her phone from his college graduation, which he never actually completed. "He's always been so brilliant," she cooed. "We've poured everything into his ventures. We believe in him completely. Our only regret is that we can't fund him more. Our resources are limited, especially with other household expenses." She glanced in my direction, her meaning perfectly clear. The insinuation was as subtle as a sledgehammer. I was the other expense. I was the financial drain holding their genius son back. It was then that I saw Mr. Sterling's mask of polite interest finally slip. He looked from the photo of Leo to my mother, and then directly at me as I stood frozen by the kitchen door. His expression wasn't one of pity. It was something else entirely. It was cold, clear anger. He had seen it. He understood everything. The constant praise for the son, the casual dismissal of the daughter, the thinly veiled complaints about my financial burden. He saw the whole rotten dynamic laid bare. That look was the external validation I didn't even know I was desperate for. It was a silent confirmation that I wasn't being oversensitive, that the injustice was real and I wasn't crazy for feeling it. He set his napkin down on the table with quiet finality, a sign that the pleasantries were over. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the air crackling with an unspoken tension. My family, completely oblivious, continued their performance, not realizing the curtain was about to come down on their entire act, with me holding the rope. The breaking point, the moment that shattered my years of quiet endurance, came over dessert. I had spent 2 days perfecting my pumpkin cheesecake with a salted caramel drizzle, the one recipe that was truly mine. A small source of pride in a house where my contributions were usually invisible. As I served the slices, My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Alara has her little hobbies," she announced to Mr. Sterling, as if I were a child presenting a macaroni necklace. "It keeps her busy." Leo, high on the attention and expensive wine, decided it was the perfect time to try and close his deal. He leaned forward, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "Alistair," he said, dropping the Mr. Sterling in a show of false intimacy. "I know talent when I see it, and I can tell you see it in me. An investment of, say, $250,000 would give me the runway I need to scale my platform globally. It's a ground floor opportunity." Mr. Sterling looked at Leo, then at my parents, who were nodding with encouraging smiles, like puppets on a string. He took a slow, deliberate bite of the cheesecake I had made. "It's an excellent cheesecake, Alara," he said, looking directly at me before turning back to Leo. "However, it's a significant amount of capital for a project with no working prototype or user acquisition strategy." My father, sensing the deal was slipping away, jumped in to defend his son, his voice thick with desperation. "The prototype is just a formality. The vision is what matters." "Leo has the vision, but he's been held back. We've done our best, but our finances have been stretched thin for years." He then made the fatal mistake of looking directly at me. His face, flushed with wine and frustration, twisted into a scowl. "Frankly," he said, his voice rising, venom dripping from every word, "it's hard to fund a genius when you're also supporting dead weight." The room went silent. The clinking of forks stopped. Dead weight. He had said it. Not just implied it, but said it out loud. In front of a guest. In front of the man I respected most in my professional life. He continued, the words spilling out in a torrent of long-held resentment. "She had her chance with her little computer thing, and she failed. We had to bail her out. Now she works a dead-end job, contributes a fraction of what she costs us, and has no ambition, no drive. She's useless. We're pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it while Leo is trying to build a rocket ship." My mother didn't protest. She just looked down at her plate, carefully arranging the crumbs with her fork, a silent endorsement of his brutal assessment. Leo smirked, a cruel, triumphant little smile. He thought my public humiliation would somehow elevate him, proving to Mr. Sterling that he was the worthy horse to bet on. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was as if I'd been physically struck. Useless, dead weight. Every fear, every insecurity my family had cultivated in me for years was just laid bare on the Thanksgiving table. I had cooked the meal, I had cleaned the house. My useless salary had paid for the very groceries on their plates. My secret freelance income was the only thing keeping the family afloat, paying for the mortgage shortfalls and credit card bills they thought were being handled by careful budgeting. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, cold, and definitive fracture. The part of me that had always sought their approval, that had always made excuses for their behavior, that had always believed that if I just worked harder and stayed quieter, they would eventually see my worth, that part of me died. I looked across the table, not with tears in my eyes, but with a clarity that was terrifying and liberating. I saw them for exactly what they were: selfish, delusional, and cruel. They weren't my family in any meaningful sense of the word. They were my captors. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to scream or cry. I looked at the one person in the room whose opinion suddenly mattered more than anything. I looked at Mr. Sterling. He had put his fork down and was watching my father with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. The bumbling, fawning father and the visionary son had finally shown their true colors. And now, it was my turn. The choice was clear. There would be no more shrinking, no more silence. I was done being a ghost. My secret weapon wasn't a document in a safety deposit box or a hidden bank account, though I had that too. My secret weapon was a man. A man who, for the past 2 years, had known me only as a faceless entity of pure skill, an elite coder named Phoenix. And he was currently staring at my father as if he were a particularly disgusting bug that needed to be squashed. My plan for reversal materialized in that single, clarifying moment of humiliation. It wasn't a premeditated strategy. It was an instinct born of years of suppressed anger. For years, I had meticulously separated my two worlds. Alara, the failure, lived in this house. Phoenix, the genius, lived online. I had protected Phoenix from my family's toxicity, and in doing so, I had protected my own sanity and self-worth. Now, it was time for Phoenix to protect Alara. My mind raced, connecting the dots with lightning speed. Alistair hadn't accepted the dinner invitation because of Leo's pathetic pitch. He was far too shrewd for that. He had a reputation for being meticulous, for doing his due diligence. When Leo, with our shared last name and city, had spammed his inbox, Alistair must have made a connection. He must have realized that the visionary pitching him a nonsensical blockchain idea was related to his best freelance coder. He hadn't come here to vet an investment. He'd come here on a reconnaissance mission. He'd come to see what kind of environment his star coder was living in, and he had just been given a front row seat to the horror show. In that instant, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight this battle. I wasn't going to get into a screaming match and be accused of being hysterical. I was going to let my work, my true self, fight it for me. I subtly met Alistair's gaze across the table. I gave him the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. It was a transfer of power, a silent request. Your move. Expose them. He understood immediately. He had been a silent observer gathering data. Now he was ready to act. His entire demeanor shifted. The polite guest vanished, replaced by the formidable CEO who could make or break companies with a single sentence. He calmly placed his hands on the table, a gesture that drew all eyes to him. He was about to take control of the narrative, and I was going to let him. While they saw me as useless, Alistair knew the truth. He knew it was Phoenix who had single-handedly rewritten the security protocols for his entire cloud infrastructure after a major breach threat. A 6-week project I completed in 2, saving his company tens of millions of dollars. He knew it was Phoenix who had designed the core algorithm for his new flagship software, Odyssey, a piece of code so elegant and efficient that his in-house engineers had studied it for weeks. He knew that for the past 6 months, I, as Phoenix, had been the lead architect on his secret Project Nightfall, a new venture so revolutionary it was poised to disrupt the entire industry. I hadn't just been a contractor, I had been his secret weapon. And the most delicious secret of all? The one that was about to detonate at this dinner table? 3 weeks ago, after a particularly successful project milestone, Alistair had sent me a cryptic message. Phoenix, your work is beyond exemplary. I'm restructuring my new venture and I want you to be a part of it. Not as a contractor, but as a founder. I'm flying out to your city in a few weeks to discuss the offer in person. Prepare yourself. The offer he outlined included a 7-figure salary and a significant equity stake. It was a life-changing opportunity, the validation of all my secret work. I had been agonizing over how to accept it, how to detonate my old life to start this new one. And now, my family had just handed me the detonator, wrapped in a pretty bow. My reversal plan wasn't about shouting or crying. It was about strategic silence. I would allow the truth to be revealed by the most credible source in the room. My family had built their entire world on a foundation of lies, centered around the false idol of Leo's potential. Alistair was about to demolish that foundation with the simple, unassailable truth of my useless competence. He had all the evidence he needed, not just from the terabytes of flawless code I had delivered to him, but from the live demonstration of my family's character he had just witnessed. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The years of anxiety, of feeling small and worthless, evaporated in the heat of my father's insult. They had thrown their most powerful punch, and it hadn't destroyed me. It had liberated me. They had mistaken my quietness for weakness, my stability for a lack of ambition. They were about to learn that the quietest people often have the most powerful storms brewing inside. And my storm, with Alistair as its thunder, was about to break. Alistair let my father's insult hang in the air for a few moments longer, allowing the toxicity to fully saturate the room. He then cleared his throat, a quiet sound that was somehow louder than all my father's shouting. "Mark," he began, his voice calm and dangerously precise. "Thank you for your candor." He turned his attention from my father to my brother. "Leo, I've listened to your pitch, both on the phone and tonight. And I have to be honest, your proposal for a blockchain-based pet influencer platform is one of the most ill-conceived ideas I have ever encountered in my career." Leo's smug smirk vanished, replaced by a look of slack-jawed disbelief. "But the synergy," he stammered. "There is no synergy," Alistair cut in sharply. "It lacks a viable revenue model, a clear target audience, and a basic understanding of blockchain technology. Frankly, it's not an investment I would consider for even a single dollar." He paused, letting the words land like stones. "However," he continued, turning his gaze back to my parents, "my trip here has not been a waste. In fact, it has been incredibly illuminating. You see, I didn't come here to see Leo." The confusion on my parents' faces was a sight to behold. "What? What do you mean?" my mother stammered, looking from Leo to Alistair. Alistair's eyes finally settled on me, and for the first time that night, he smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile of respect. "I came here to see Alara." If the room was silent before, it was now a vacuum. My parents and brother just stared, their minds unable to process this new information. "Alara?" my father choked out. "Why on earth would you come to see her?" "Because for the past 2 years," Alistair explained, his voice resonating with authority, "Your useless's daughter, the one who does its support for a paper company, has been the single most valuable asset in my company's technological development. Though I didn't know her by name, I knew her by the name Phoenix." Leo's face went pale. He knew that name. I had helped him with his pathetic website code a few times, and he'd seen the legendary handle on top coder forums. He thought Phoenix was some mythical programming god in Silicon Valley. "Phoenix," my mother whispered, the name foreign and strange on her tongue. "Yes, Phoenix," Alistair affirmed. "The anonymous coder who rebuilt my company's entire cybersecurity framework after a breach threat, a project my own team estimated would take 6 months, and which she completed in 6 weeks. The genius who architected the core algorithm for our best-selling analytics software, Odyssey. The lead developer on a confidential project that is about to make my company the undisputed leader in its field." He gestured toward me with an open hand. "Your daughter, Alara, is Phoenix. She is, without exaggeration, one of the most brilliant programmers I have ever had the privilege of working with." He let that sink in, the silence stretching into an eternity. I could see the gears turning in my family's heads. The denial, the confusion, the dawning, horrified realization. "That's impossible," my father finally managed to say, his voice weak. She fixes printers." My mother tried to rally, a desperate attempt to regain control. "Alistair, this must be some mistake. Alara is a good girl, but she's not. She's not at that level." "Oh, she is," Alistair countered, his voice now laced with ice. "She fixes printers for a day job because her spirit was crushed by a family that mistakes quiet competence for a lack of ambition. While you were funding artisanal air, she was earning a six-figure income working on some of the most advanced tech projects in the world. An income, I suspect, that has been paying for more of this household's expenses than you would care to admit." My mother looked at me, her eyes wide with a million questions. She was remembering all the times the mortgage was magically paid, the credit card debt that mysteriously vanished. She thought it was my father's clever investing. Alistair wasn't finished. He stood up, commanding the room. "I didn't just come here to meet her. I came here with a proposal. Mark, Susan, you believe your son is a visionary. You believe Alara is dead weight. You have it completely backward." He looked directly at me. "Alara, I am here tonight to formally offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer and co-founding partner in my new venture, Project Nightfall. It comes with a seven-figure salary and a 20% equity stake in a company that is projected to be worth over $100 million within 3 years. The sound my mother made was a strangled gasp. Leo looked like he was going to be physically sick. My father simply stared, his face ashen, his entire worldview crumbling around him. But that was my meeting," Leo whined, his voice pathetic and childish. "He was here to invest in me." "Your meeting," Alistair said with a withering look, "was a convenient excuse. I needed to see for myself what kind of situation Alara was in before I made this offer. I needed to understand why someone with her talent was hiding. And tonight, you have all shown me exactly why. You don't deserve her. You don't deserve her talent, her loyalty, or her financial support." He then turned to me, his voice softening. "Alara, the offer is real. The jet is waiting. We can go tonight, and you never have to set foot in this house again." I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. I looked at the stunned faces of the people who had spent my entire life making me feel small. I felt no pity. I felt no anger. I just felt nothing. They were strangers. "I accept," I said, my voice clear and strong. I looked at my father. "It seems the deadweight is about to be a multi-millionaire. I hope you and your rocket ship builder have a wonderful life." I walked around the table, not even bothering to pick up my coat. Alistair met me at the door. As we walked out into the cool night air, leaving them frozen in a tableau of their own making, I didn't look back once. The life of Alara, the failure, was over. The life of Alara, the partner, was just beginning. The slam of the front door behind us was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a chapter ending, a prison gate closing for the last time. As Mr. Sterling Alistair and I walked down the driveway to his waiting black car, I expected to feel a storm of emotions. Grief, anger, sadness. Instead, I felt an overwhelming crystalline sense of peace. The weight of their expectations, their disappointments, their very presence had been lifted from my shoulders so suddenly that I felt almost lightheaded. Inside the car, the plush leather seats and quiet hum of the engine felt like a world away from the chaos I had just left. Alistair didn't speak right away, giving me a moment to breathe. "Are you all right?" he finally asked, his voice gentle. "I've never been better," I replied, and I was surprised to find that it was the absolute truth. The humiliation had been a fire, but instead of burning me, it had burned away all the chains of guilt and obligation that had tied me to that house. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. The screen lit up with Dad. I silenced it. A moment later, Mom. I silenced that one too. Then a text from Leo. "You can't be serious. You owe us. You can't just leave." I turned the phone off completely and dropped it in my purse. That digital umbilical cord was now severed. "They won't understand what happened for a while," Alistair said, seeming to read my mind. "And when they do, they will likely try to frame it as a betrayal." "Let them," I said. Their opinion stopped mattering the moment my father said useless. We didn't go to the airport that night. Alistair had anticipated I might need some time to decompress. He had a suite booked at the Four Seasons, and he offered me the adjoining room, no questions asked. "Get some rest, Alara," he said as he handed me a key card. "Tomorrow, we'll talk about the future. Your future." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without anxiety. I didn't dream of printer jams or condescending remarks. I slept soundly, securely, in a quiet room high above the city, a literal and metaphorical elevation from the life I had left behind. The next morning, I ordered room service an expensive Eggs Benedict I would never have allowed myself before and ate it slowly, savoring the taste of freedom. Then I got to work. I used the hotel's business center to access my secret bank account. With a few clicks, I transferred a significant portion of my freelance earnings to my primary account. Then I paid off every cent of my student loans and the credit card debt I had accumulated after my first startup failed. The rest I moved into a high-yield savings account, a nest egg that was now purely for me. Then, I did something I had only dreamed of. I opened my laptop, logged into my paper company's HR portal, and typed out my resignation, effective immediately. I felt a thrill as I hit send. I was no longer Elara, the IT tech. I was no longer Phoenix, the anonymous coder. I was just Elara, a free woman. Later that day, Alistair and I met in the hotel restaurant. We didn't talk about my family. Instead, we talked about Project Nightfall. He laid out the business plan, the market projections, the team he was assembling. As he spoke, I felt an excitement I hadn't felt since the early days of my own startup. This time, however, it wasn't a dream I was building on a shoestring budget and desperate hope. It was a calculated, well-funded venture with one of the industry's most respected leaders at the helm. And I was going to be his partner. I started sketching out architectural diagrams on a napkin. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt my mind truly come alive again. Meanwhile, back at the house, I could only imagine the fallout. Without my income, the fragile financial structure my parents had built would collapse. The mortgage, the car payments for Leo's sports car, the credit card bills filled with his business expenses, the reality of those numbers would soon come crashing down on them. They had killed their golden goose, not realizing she was the one laying all the eggs that kept their fragile kingdom afloat. 8 months later, I was sitting in my corner office on the 34th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Austin, the new headquarters of our company, which we had named Nexus. The view of the city was breathtaking, a daily reminder of how far I had come. The title on my door read Alara Vance, co-founder and CTO. My life was unrecognizable, and it was utterly, brilliantly my own. Nexus had launched 2 months prior to explosive success. The technology I had developed as Phoenix, refined and scaled by a team of the brightest engineers I had handpicked, was already making waves. We were being called the next big thing in tech, the disruptor Leo had always pretended to be. My equity stake, which had seemed theoretical at that Thanksgiving dinner, was now worth a number with so many zeros I still had trouble comprehending it. But the money, as incredible as it wasn't the most valuable part. It was the respect. It was the freedom. It was the joy of coming to work every day to build something meaningful with a team that valued my mind, not my ability to serve dinner. The culture I helped build at Nexus was one of radical transparency and merit the exact opposite of the one I'd grown up in. I had bought a sleek, modern condo overlooking the river. It was minimalist and clean, a stark contrast to the cluttered, suffocating atmosphere of my parents' house. It was my sanctuary, a space that was entirely my own, filled with books, technology, and silence when I needed it. My family, as I had predicted, had not fared as well. The first few weeks after my departure were a barrage of angry voicemails and manipulative texts. When they realized I wasn't coming back, the tone shifted to desperate pleas. The financial reality had hit them hard and fast. I heard through the grapevine of a concerned aunt that they had been forced to sell the house I grew up in. They couldn't afford the mortgage without my contribution and the secret funds I'd been using to cover their shortfalls. They had downsized to a small, cramped apartment in a less desirable part of town, right next to the noisy highway. My father had to take on a second job as a nighttime security guard to make ends meet. My mother, who hadn't worked in 30 years, was now a cashier at a local grocery store, the strain visible on her face every time my aunt saw her. Leo's rocket ship had failed to launch. Without the bank of Mom and Dad, and by extension, me, to fund him, his pet influencer platform collapsed. His fancy car was repossessed. Faced with the prospect of getting a real job for the first time in his life, he had floundered. The last I heard, he was delivering food for a gig economy app, using a beat-up sedan he'd had to buy himself. My aunt mentioned seeing him one evening, rushing out of his car in the rain with a soggy bag of takeout, looking tired and defeated. The visionary was now a delivery boy. They tried to reach out about a month ago. My mother called, her voice thin and tired. "Alara," she said, we made a mistake. We were wrong. Your father lost his second job. We're behind on rent. We miss you. We need your help." I had prepared for this call. I had discussed it with my therapist, whom I started seeing to unpack the years of emotional abuse. I knew what I had to do. "I can't help you financially," I said, my voice calm but firm. It was a boundary I had promised myself I would hold. Giving you money now would just be repeating the same unhealthy pattern that hurt all of us. You and Dad need to learn to stand on your own. "But we're your family," she cried, the familiar manipulative tool being brought out one last time. "Being family is a responsibility, not a blank check," I replied, the words feeling true and solid in my mouth. "And you failed in that responsibility to me. My help is no longer a resource you can tap into." I did, however, offer them something else. I offered to pay for a full year of family counseling for the three of them, and for individual therapy for Leo. If you are serious about understanding what went wrong and fixing your dynamic, I will support that. That is the only help I am willing to give. The choice is yours. She had been disappointed, but she accepted. They had their first session last week. I don't know if it will work. I don't know if they are capable of the kind of profound change that is needed. But for the first time, They are being forced to confront the consequences of their actions without me there to cushion the fall. That, in itself, is a form of justice. My relationship with them is now defined by a distant, carefully guarded boundary. There are no more holiday dinners, no more fake pleasantries. There is only the quiet, sterile hope that they might one day become healthier people. But my happiness is no longer dependent on that hope. Alistair and I have become more than just business partners. We discovered a shared love for old sci-fi movies, spicy Thai food, and late-night coding sessions. Our relationship is built on a foundation of mutual respect and intellectual admiration, something I had never experienced before. It's slow, it's steady, and it's real. Last week, he took me back to Boston for a business trip. As we drove past my old neighborhood, I felt a flicker of something, but it wasn't sadness or anger. It was gratitude. Gratitude for that horrible Thanksgiving dinner that had acted as a controlled demolition of my old life, clearing the way for a new, better one to be built in its place. It was the day my cage door was blasted open. Looking back, I realize my family didn't just call me useless that night. They handed me my freedom on a silver platter. For years, I had defined my worth through their eyes, and in their eyes, I would always be lacking. Their validation was a moving target I could never hit, because the game was rigged from the start. I wasn't meant to win. I was meant to be the invisible engine in their broken-down car, the permanent, reliable source of support for their chosen star. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't about money or success. It was that you cannot let people who benefit from your lack of self-esteem be the arbiters of your value. Your worth is not determined by their praise or their criticism. It is an inherent quality, something you build and recognize within yourself through your actions, your skills, and your character. I was Phoenix all along, even when they could only see me as the girl who fixed printers. I just needed to stop waiting for them to acknowledge it and start living like it. The moment I stopped needing their approval was the moment I truly became powerful. My life now is not a revenge story. It's a story of reclamation. I reclaimed my talent, my finances, my future, and most importantly, myself. The justice wasn't in seeing my family struggle. It was in my own success and peace, things that had nothing to do with them at all. It was in building a new family, a chosen family, of colleagues and friends who saw me, valued me, and challenged me to be even better. So, I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where your true value was overlooked by those who were supposed to support you most? What was the moment you realized you had to stop seeking their approval and start creating your own? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't up for debate. Thank you for listening. And remember, never let anyone else hold the pen that writes your story. You are the author, and you deserve a brilliant one.